I'm Robert Sumwalt. I'm a board member with the National Transportation Safety Board, and with me today is Dr. Dan Bauer. Dr. Bauer is the investigator in charge for this accident. Today is the first full day that our investigators have spent working on the accident. It's our first full day of boots on the ground. It's been a very busy day, but at the same time, it's a very productive day. We started out at 8 o'clock this morning with an organizational meeting. Our investigators consider the organizational meeting to be the most important meeting of the field phase of the investigation. And this is where we designate parties to the investigation, we set the tone for the investigation, and we lay out the protocols and the framework for how the field portion of the investigation and how the rest of the investigation, for that matter, will go. I mentioned the designation of parties. The Ntsb designates parties to the investigation, those organizations that can provide technical expertise to the investigation. And the parties are the Federal Aviation Administration, UPS, National Air Traffic Controllers Association, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, the Independent Pilots Association. And in accordance with international treaties, since the Airbus A300-600 is manufactured in France, in accordance with international treaties, the French equivalent of the Ntsb, the BEA, Bureau Enquête d'Accident, has been named as an accredited representative to the Ntsb's investigation. Airbus and the European Aviation Safety Agency are serving as technical advisors to the BEA. I think most of you know by now that the recorders were recovered around 11 o'clock this morning. It took investigators about 3 hours to locate them. They were covered in hardened plastic, metal, and cargo. And they, as many of you have seen the tweeted pictures, they were blackened and sooted, and we are cautiously optimistic that we will be able to obtain good data from those recorders. They are being flown as we speak to Washington under the escort of a federal official. They should arrive in Washington at the Washington Reagan Airport tonight at about 7 o'clock Eastern Time. They will be met at the airport by an Ntsb official and transported to the Ntsb's headquarters, where our laboratory personnel will begin the process of opening the boxes and trying to extract data from them. As you can imagine, these boxes are made not to be opened up. They're made to withstand crash forces and heat, so therefore it's a little difficult to get into them. We have to saw into them and cut into them, and that takes some time. And there's software that they have to use to download the data. We should know tomorrow, and our investigators will work late tonight to open these boxes and to attempt to download them. We should know tomorrow whether or not we have good data on these recorders. Our Systems and Structures Investigative Group, I mentioned yesterday that we've had excellent assistance and cooperation from the state, local, and federal authorities. And an example of that would be that today the Hoover Police Department flew their helicopter with an FBI photographer to conduct an aerial survey of the crash scene. Our investigative groups have documented the forward fuselage. They have documented the cockpit, the location of switches and controls. And we are in the process, as we speak, of documenting the positions of the flight controls on the tail surface of the aircraft. Our power plants group has found that the preliminary evidence indicates no evidence of an uncontained engine failure. There's no evidence of a pre-impact fire. And there is evidence of debris, ingestion of foreign debris, such as dirt and wood from trees. Now, all of this is a preliminary look at the engine, and the engine will be transported, both engines will be transported to the manufacturer for a complete teardown. But this is what our experienced power plant investigators are telling us that their preliminary investigation is finding. Our Operations and Human Performance Group, they have put in a detailed request to UPS for a number of crew-related documents, including training records, flight schedules, employment records, and UPS is cooperating fully with us on those requests. Our Maintenance Records Group will convene at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning in Louisville at UPS's maintenance headquarters to begin poring over the maintenance history of the aircraft. And our Air Traffic Control Group, they are, as we speak, interviewing the controllers that operated that particular aircraft, the controllers that worked that particular aircraft as it came inbound to Birmingham. We have obtained the radar data, which can be plotted to show the point in space, the time, the altitude, airspeed or ground speed, and so we've obtained that data. I want to emphasize that we are just in the very beginning stages of the investigation. Again, today is our first full day of the investigative activities. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to be done, but I think we are right where we should be at this point in an investigation. So that's the end of my prepared remarks. I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Can you tell us whether or not this was the aircraft's first attempt at a landing on this runway yesterday morning, or did they do a go-around?
Was this the aircraft's first attempt to land at the airport, or did they do a go-around? And I have no knowledge that it was anything other than their first attempt, but we will be, we tried to call the guy, our investigators who's interviewing the controllers, because he's still working. We don't have all that information right now, but as information does become available, we will be laying it out for you. Thank you for your question. There's a question here.
Was there any evidence of failure of the landing lights on the runway?
Is there any evidence of failure of the lighting on the runway? We have no indications of that, but that's one of the things we will be looking at is the lighting, the navigational aids associated with that runway. Yes, sir.
Was the east-west runway open at the time of this, or was it just the north-south?
So the east was the runway which is designated as 624. Was that runway open? That is the longer of the runways here at Birmingham. Was that runway open? It was closed. It was NOTAM'd or notice to airmen. It was closed that morning for maintenance on the runway centerline lights. There's a question here.
If there was evidence of debris being ingested into the engines, would that have been enough to have perhaps caused a loss of power, or do you think that happened as it hit the trees and its fate was already determined?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on that, but the question is, why was there debris in the engines? It is indicative of an aircraft, of an engine going through trees and striking dirt. So that's the fact right there. So is there any other questions? I'll take two more questions. There's a question here.
Could you explain again about the position of the aircraft and how it was found? You said there was no evidence of a fire before the plane. Can you explain a little bit more about the position?
Can I discuss the layout of the wreckage and let me elaborate on the idea of no fire. When I talk about no fire, no pre-impact fire, I'm referring to the engines. So the engines, there was no evidence of a pre-impact fire with either of the two engines. Did that answer your question, or was there more to that you wanted? Okay, one more question.
What will happen with the wreckage itself?
What will happen with the wreckage itself after the NTSB is through with it? We will turn it over to the airline, UPS, and then it will be taken away, removed, and stored. Usually they are stored in an aircraft salvage yard. So that's it. We will be conducting additional press briefings. You can follow us on NTSB's Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @NTSB, or you can follow us on our webpage, www.ntsb.gov. Thank you very much.